Helper Show. You can always hear us Wednesdays at 7 p.m. on WBAI. That's 99.5 FM or WBAI.org. Also check us out on SoundCloud and iTunes and rate us and review us on iTunes. And make sure you keep an eye out for Patreon so you can get extra special goodies from the Katie Halper Show, like exclusive interviews, videos. And on today's show, we go over the headlines and the news, but we have a really, really special interview that we do with Phyllis Rodriguez. Phyllis Rodriguez and her husband, Orlando Rodriguez, lost their son on 9/11. Phyllis and Orlando Rodriguez lost their son, Gregory, on 9/11. He was 31 years old and working on the 103rd floor of the World Trade Center. But the Rodriguez family decided to speak out against using their son's death as a pretext for war. Phyllis co-founded September 11th Families for a Peaceful Tomorrow. Phyllis and Orlando are also the subject of a documentary called In Our Son's Name, and make sure you go to inoursonsname.com to find out more about that. So, Gabe, how are you doing?
I feel great today.
You look great.
Thank you so much.
He's wearing a negligee.
I'm wearing a fun shirt I got in Brazil.
Oh yeah, it is a fun shirt.
I went down there years ago before there was the Zika scare and before the Olympics.
Before it was cool. And
yeah,
dangerous.
Way before. Well, I think it was always.
Yeah, a couple centuries of danger.
Yeah. So, but other than that, things are going great.
Awesome. Well, we're so excited to be joining you guys, dear listeners. And of course, Sunday was marked the anniversary of the attack on democracy when planes flew over the presidential palace in Santiago, Chile. During a U.S.-backed coup to overthrow the democratically elected President Salvador Allende, ushering in a brutal dictatorship of killings, disappearances, cutting-edge torture techniques, and more under the right-wing dictator Augusto Pinochet.
Pinochet, what a cute name, though.
Every
time I saw that name as a kid, I was like, Pinocchio. I get it. Okay.
As a 5-year-old, when your parents were reading you.
We had a lot. My mother was an immigration lawyer, so we had a lot of people fleeing from persecution, disappearances, and torture.
Reappearing
Reappearing
in
disappearing
the
from
household.
Chile and reappearing in our house in Washington, D.C., offering us empanadas.
Nice. Empanadas for the Embassy of Empanadas. And the thing about the Pinochet thing, it only lasted 20 years. Could have been worse. Could have been 30. Could have been 40, right?
Yeah, 20 years, it's a drop in a bucket.
A drop in the bucket, yeah.
You can sprint through that.
You could totally sprint through that if you're alive.
It's just 20 years that you can't go outside at 10 p.m. at night because there's a curfew.
Right.
But a lot of people, some people are late bloomers. They have a curfew until they're 20.
So these weird people in Chile who don't agree with our pro-Pinochet stance decided that they would march to the city's main cemetery in Santiago to commemorate those who were killed that day and during the dictatorship. How do you like that transition from our joking around to a march to the main cemetery? And of course, we have a little bit of a scare with Hillary Clinton. She did almost stumble when she walked out of a commemoration in Lower Manhattan for 9/11.
And there was a lot of confusion after that, too, because people thought she, at first they released a press release said that she was suffering from allergies.
Right.
And I understand that because I have allergies.
Sure, yeah.
I never faint from taking too much Benadryl, but okay.
Right.
And then afterwards...
We all have different immune systems. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then it came out that she flip-flopped on that.
She totally flip-flopped on that. In fact, listen, I don't think there's anything wrong with her. I think there's so many crazy conspiracy theories about the catheter. I actually think that Michael Moore was dead on. He tweeted, well, pneumonia, that's serious. Campaign kept it hidden Friday, Saturday, Sunday. No wonder the crazies get traction. Dems are pros at losing elections. Sadly, Dems do win elections. Unfortunately, although slightly better than Republicans.
No, I don't think it's a big deal that she got pneumonia because she's on the move. You're on tour. I've gotten pneumonia before. I get it. I hope she takes care of herself.
Some of my best friends get pneumonia.
Dude, Jim Henson died from pneumonia.
See, okay,
right? One of my favorite people in the whole world.
That's really terrible.
Died from working too hard.
No self-care. He needs to do more self-care.
So Hillary, self-care.
Self-care, yeah. So the thing is that she almost stumbled when she was getting into a van. She left early. But the major thing is that she'd said that it was allergies. She needs to just come out and say, I have a pneumonia. But she lets Trump frame it. You know what I mean? She lets him frame the debate. But this is something that no one else has reported on, okay? Well, they report on the story, but not the spin I'm about to give it. New York Senator and Islamophobic hawk extraordinaire Chuck Schumer has also revealed, guess what he has?
Pneumonia. In solidarity.
Well,
is that
it
performative?
Could be in solidarity.
It sounds like performative allyship.
It is. I think that's exactly what it is.
I too have pneumonia. I stand with her.
Right. I too sing with an ammonia. I sing America with ammonia. And everyone's been making fun of him for doing that because it seems like a pathetic, oh, we all have ammonia. You have ammonia, I have ammonia. At first they came for the ammonia sufferers, and I didn't say anything because I didn't have an ammonia.
That reminds me of like when one child, unfortunately, this is sad, but in an elementary school, a child might have like cancer or something, and then they lose all their hair because of chemo.
Oh, and then the kids shave their hair.
And then everybody else shaves their hair in solidarity.
I think I figured something out, guys. Ready? How do you spread ammonia? Many ways, but think of mono. How do you spread mono? Kissing. It's the kissing disease. Hillary Clinton has ammonia. Chuck Schumer has an ammonia. I'm just saying they could be having an affair.
Okay.
I feel like he came out.
I mean, that's I'd believe anything at this point. Hello. With all the disinformation out there, who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Unclear, yeah. And Sunday was the opening games of the NFL. So we spoke to Tony Smith about it, and you got to listen to that episode because she's the one who turned her back to the flag 15 years ago. We talked about Colin Kaepernick, the San Francisco 49er, who refused to stand up during the national anthem last month during a preseason game.
He was tired.
He was tired of police violence, police brutality, and racism.
I get it. Okay, maybe he's just been listening to that NWA propaganda. Listening to the old songs
and living his life,
and maybe seeing reality.
Right? Maybe exactly.
Maybe he was on Facebook and saw
Philando
Castillo.
Castillo.
He got shot and was killed live on Facebook.
Yeah, he could have seen that. There's so many to choose from, honestly.
Was it Mike Brown?
I don't know. It could have been Mike Brown.
Was it Freddie Gray?
I don't know. Yeah, unclear. Trayvon Martin. But that's not police, but that's an aspiring police. Anyway, what happened was Sunday during this game, the opening game, there were a bunch of different football players who showed solidarity. Some of them stayed kneeling, took a knee, as you call it, apparently. They took a knee. Some clenched their fists, like a little Black Panther styles, although it didn't have the fist wasn't lifted all the way. They bent their arms, which may be some kind of compromise. I'm not sure. And of course, people were very, very, very concerned that it was very disrespectful. A lot of people are talking about how incredibly disrespectful it is. And a lot of people whose opinion matters not at all. So Rob Lowe tried to make himself relevant again by tweeting, "Dear NFL, any player who wants to boycott the anthem on 9/11 should be asked to remain in the locker room until kickoff. It's not their moment." Thank you, Rob. It's your 20 seconds of fame again. And then Kate Upton, supermodel, went even further, saying, "Protest all you want and use social media all you want. However, during the nearly 2 minutes when that song is playing, I believe everyone should put their hands on their heart and be proud of our country, for we are all truly blessed." And then she says this really great thing. She goes, "Recent history has shown that it is a place where anyone, no matter what race or gender, has the potential to become president of the United States. We live in the most special place in the world and should be thankful." So I like her because basically what she's saying is not only should you not be protesting during this time period, this time, the 2 minutes the song lasts, but what's the deal? Why are you protesting with a black president? I had this image of her traveling throughout history and being like, "Excuse me, Rosa, I get that you're tired and that's fine, but I'm trying to get to an appointment, and this bus needs to not be delayed by that. So anytime that once I get off, about 6 minutes, once I get off, it's all yours." And to all the people who say that, nothing's more disrespectful than not standing during the Pledge of Allegiance, that in itself is really disrespectful to say, because you're basically saying someone not standing up is more disrespectful than lying about the war, sending the troops to kill and die based on lies. If you care about the troops, is the priority really being up in arms about someone sitting down during the national anthem versus slashing veteran services and veterans benefits?
Yeah, these vets, they need the services. They need the benefits. Stop slashing those.
Stop slashing them, yeah. If anything, 9/11 is the best time to not stand up, because that tragedy was totally co-opted and used to justify more war and killing. And it's not that it was just used as a pretext. Like, they lied about it.
The United States knows that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. Any country on the face of the earth with an active intelligence program knows that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction.
There is no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction. There is no doubt that he is amassing them to use against our friends, against our allies, and against us.
The war on terror is, you can't distinguish between Al-Qaeda and Saddam when you talk about the war on terror.
The choice is his. And if he does not disarm, the United States of America will lead a coalition and disarm him in the name of peace.
I still can't get over that Ari Fleischer said in 2009 that we couldn't risk Saddam Hussein attacking us again.
Joining me now, Ari Fleischer, former White House press secretary.
But after September 11th, having been hit once, how could we take a chance that Saddam might not strike again?
That was 3 years after Bush admitted that Saddam actually had nothing to do with it.
The idea is to try to help change the Middle East. Now, look, part of the reason we went into Iraq was the main reason we went into Iraq at the time was we thought he had weapons of mass destruction. It turns out he didn't.
Get on message. Ari Fleischer is one of my favorite people because he tweets every year on September 11th. He likes to tweet about it, like a kind of blow-by-blow, moment-by-moment thing.
Not live tweet, but a commemorative, commemorative
yep.
live tweet.
I want to trade him as a Jew. I want to trade him. I'll take Charles Manson. If there's like a draft.
Yeah.
I don't want him in. He's the worst. I mean, we have Netanyahu too, but anyway, yeah. Ari Fleischer is just. I don't know why he's able to leave his house. Like, he should be ashamed. People should be throwing stuff at him. I don't know what. What could he?
I don't know where he lives. I don't know what he does now.
But we could find out. We could organize a
Could
picket.
someone who listens to this, just put in the Facebook group where Ari lives?
Exactly.
We need to know.
Someone on Twitter did a marry, F-word, or kill. Have you heard about this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't need to say anything about the man.
Well,
we all know that he's a terrible human being.
Hold on, I just want to. We should do something.
He's a dumpster fire.
I don't even know what that means. We should do something.
I mean, think about a dumpster, then think about it being on fire.
And that's
who wants to be around that?
No, I know, and he smiles. But okay, marry. Let's say marry, sleep with, or vaporize, because we don't want to say kill.
You know me, man. I live a clean life. I'm pious.
So who would you
I'm
do
a celibate human being.
Madoff? Bernie, because when I said I said on Twitter that I want to trade him for a bad non-Jew, and someone tweeted at me, MF, Mary, blah, 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 Bernie Madoff, Fleischer, and Sheldon Adelson.
Which one of those would you? That's your three?
I say that no, he gave that to me. Yeah, I say that Madoff is like way. I mean, he's an angelic stud compared to Fleischer and Adelson.
I mean, what's wrong with little white collar crime?
Yeah, compared to, I mean, he was in jail, but this guy has way more blood on his hands, Ari Fleischer. He should be ashamed. I hate that he's accepted. He and Kissinger should be on an island somewhere, making out. That's the best punishment ever.
Just drinking daiquiris,
yeah,
giving each other foot rubs.
Oh my God. Yeah. So now we are going to call Phyllis Rodriguez, who lost her son on September 11th and who's become a major activist and organizer for peace and reconciliation.
Tragic what happened to her son. And
there's a documentary.
The movie is called In Our Son's Name. And what I really loved about it was that it offers a counter narrative to what we have heard about with September 11th, and also offers us an alternative to sort of vindictive foreign policy that punches back at the wrong people.
Right, and creates more of it, right? I mean, They always talk about how what radicalizes people often to become terrorists, this is an oversimplification, but is seeing drones killing innocent people. Like, that's a pretty good way to...
Make an enemy for life.
Yeah, how to make an enemy. And
blowing up all these innocent people at a wedding in Afghanistan.
Exactly. And it's interesting because Phyllis and Orlando, they're not just against the war in Iraq, but they opposed invading Afghanistan too.
Right. So yeah, it's a great movie. If you've got a chance to see it, do that.
Yeah.
When I came into the building from my walk, the porter in the building said, "Oh, there's a big fire at the World Trade Center." And I ran up the stairs to the 4th floor where we lived. turned on the answering machine. There was the message from Greg, and he was in the North Tower. And the message said, "There's been a terrible accident at the Trade Center. I'm okay."
We went through the motions of going to the hospitals where there were lists and still had hope that he was somewhere in some emergency ward. But I think we knew by the end of the day that something was wrong, that we wouldn't admit it to ourselves, but we had this hunch that he had died.
So we had about 36 hours to not have to accept it, but for it to be there waiting in the wings as kind of a growing conviction, but we'll hold out.
So that was the beginning of a new mode for us.
But now that war has been declared on us, we will lead the world to victory. This enemy attacked not just our people, but all freedom-loving people everywhere in the world.
No cave is deep enough to escape the patient justice of the United States of America.
We had been talking about what we thought the political implications of this would be. Our government was going to probably react in ways that we would not ascribe to. I think on looking back, it helped us handle the grief in a sense, because we're trying to make sense of why this happened. And then one morning after breakfast, Orlando disappeared into the other room and came back about 15 minutes later with a letter that he had composed, not in our son's name, which synthesized what we had been talking about.
A recent poll shows that 90% of Americans support some form of military retaliation against the terrorists or the countries that support them. But not everyone who lost a loved one in the World Trade Centers wants revenge. Orlando Rodriguez wrote a letter about war called Not in Our Son's Name.
Our son died a victim of an inhuman ideology. Our actions should not serve the same purpose.
This letter circulated on the internet and was widely read. So we started getting feedback from people we never met or heard of. We got hundreds of letters in the mail because people looked us up, looked up our addresses from other countries. And we were approached by human rights groups, by groups that work for nonviolence and against the death penalty, and peace groups.
But what about so many Americans who feel helpless and angry if the U.S. doesn't strike back?
When I hear thoughtless talk of showing them how strong we are, I feel that I see people like my son, who just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, dying in other lands. And that hurts me.
We are going to call Phyllis Rodriguez.
Hi, Katie.
Hi, Phyllis. How are you?
Good, thank you.
So we're here, and my co-host Gabe Pacheco is here. So Gabe.
Hello.
Yeah. Hi,
Phyllis.
Dave.
So thank you so much for joining us, Phyllis, and for coming on to the show. And it's
My pleasure.
It's a real honor to have you on. You lost your son, Greg, on 9/11 and in the World Trade Center. You and your family have been really incredibly inspiring. So many people who didn't lose anyone on 9/11 were so gung-ho about invading Afghanistan, fighting war in Iraq. And yet you and your husband, Orlando, and your daughter, Julia, had a very different response to that.
Yes. Well, Orlando and I have always been socially aware, politically aware, and very soon after the attacks, we realized that this was going to be a big political issue. And we, by the second day, we were afraid that our government was going to start dropping bombs on Afghanistan in retaliation. Somehow, through the shock and everything, we realized that we had a strong voice as victims, a victim's family member, because somehow in our country the culture is one of violence and vengeance, and that's the common assumption, that if someone in your family was murdered, you would want to punish that person to the ultimate, even if it meant the death penalty. But we don't want that. And we realize that because we're victims' family members, we might be listened to more. So on the third day after, Orlando wrote a letter called Not in My Son's Name. We had hoped it would get into the New York Times as an op-ed or a letter, but it ended up circulating on the internet instead, and then the Times wouldn't publish it, which was just as well because we think it got more attention this way. And it did two things. People have told us it gave them a feeling of hope that there wasn't only one response, and it also created the opportunity for us to be connected to other family members, victims' family members around the country who felt as we did and had either written pieces or had appeared in media or demonstrated against the war. That was a wonderful thing because we eventually formed 9/11 Families for Peaceful Tomorrows, which still exists today and has various projects regarding things that have come directly from the attacks themselves. I have always admired people who did this kind of thing in the past, and I'd always say to myself, how brave. I don't know if I would be able to do it myself, like the parents of a murder victim sitting with the offender's family in the court and then appearing together outside the court to the media. Seeing that we're all human and we all are capable of doing some bad things, but we hope we won't. And when someone does, we try to see beyond that what made them act that way.
So in the film, you talk about how you had an emotional response and an instinctive response of wanting to forgive or of forgiveness. And did you ever feel a desire to that bloodlust, that vengeance that you clearly did not pursue, but did that even flash into your mind or into your heart?
Oh, absolutely. Very strongly. I think it's a natural response to an occasion like this. The difference is that I wouldn't act on it. But of course, angry, fantasies of vengeance, anger. And, but, that's part of us as much as the desire to love, and to want peace and goodness in the world. They're both part of us. And I think what matters in the end is how we act. So recognizing that those kinds of feelings are normal and nothing to hide or be ashamed of is very important. And I'll tell you, in the first year, I vented my anger against George W. Bush.
Ah, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, he was a safe target because he was doing so many horrible things.
Right, and there were no hate crimes being committed against white Texan men.
That's right.
Not at that
being
moment.
Rounded up in detention centers,
exactly.
right?
If only,
yeah.
So, and also sort of your path of seeking forgiveness and looking to increase peace in the world led you to partnerships with like the families of some of the perpetrators or conspirators around 9/11?
Well, not some of the 19 people who the hijackers all died.
Correct. Yeah.
And they all were from the Middle East. We never tried to contact them. If it had been offered to me, I would have jumped at it. The person we got to know is Aisha Wafi, whose son Zacarias Moussaoui was detained in a. He's a Moroccan friend or French Moroccan, His mother was born in Morocco and then migrated to France.
What helped bring me out of my own grief was the contact with Aisha El-Wafi. I had wanted to meet her when I saw her in the media. I felt empathy for her as a mother, sympathy for her being the mother of someone who at the moment was next to Osama bin Laden, the most unpopular person in the United States.
Zacarias Moussaoui, a French citizen, is charged with conspiring to commit acts of terrorism and murder in association with Osama bin Laden's terror network. 4 of the 6 counts carry the death penalty.
He was being held in a place run by immigration because he had overstayed his visa. And so he was virtually locked up and incommunicado from early August. And the reason he was there is that he was a member of Al-Qaeda. He was following many of the patterns that the conspirators did, although to call them conspirators is exaggerating because nobody knows how many people knew what was going to be done. Probably was just the actual leaders of it. But people were training in pairs, and they were going to flying schools.
In Florida.
Yeah. So Zacarias was doing that too, but he was doing it alone. He had a mission that he was pursuing. He had told, this is the way it's been told, that, and I heard his testimony during his hearing, that he had told Osama bin Laden that he had a dream of flying a plane into the White House. And eventually Osama bin Laden agreed to finance him to come to the U.S. to carry out his mission. Now, when he was in a jet flying school in Minnesota, in the Twin Cities, they were learning to, it was by simulation. So they were learning to take off and land jets. He told the instructor, I don't need to find out how to land, I just want to know how to take off.
Terrible thing to tell an instructor.
Yeah.
Not the brightest, right?
Yeah.
So
red flagged.
Right, the red flag came up, and this is in August, early August of 2001. He reported to the head of the FBI in Minneapolis, St. Paul, who contacts the headquarters and says, I need it's some sort of an order allowing her to search his where he was living for evidence of any nefarious activity. They denied her.
Wow.
And she was very upset. She eventually became a whistleblower. But they denied her, but she did manage to interest the Immigration Service. That's why he was in a detention center waiting for a hearing and to see if they would deport him. Meanwhile, after the fact, the FBI said, hey, wait a minute, well, who was that she was this woman, Bernadette or something like that, was talking about in Minnesota? And then they saw what it was, a Muslim guy, 31, actually the same age as Greg, our son, and look at his history. So they indicted him, and they didn't have anything to go on relating him to the September 11th attacks because it was all charges like conspiracy to kill Americans, conspiracy to destroy property, et cetera, with violence, intention to commit violence. Anyway.
So what you're saying is it's likely that he didn't know about he wasn't down with the 19 guys.
He didn't know. He didn't know. And he actually had written to his mother and said that he didn't know until the interrogators told him.
Right, because he's sort of, in my mind, associated with that attack, and the media's made it, in my mind, sound like he's affiliated with all of that, but he wasn't. He was on his own.
He wasn't, and it was never corrected, and it's on the record that he didn't know about it. He had nothing to do with the attacks, but it has not been corrected by the general media. Many people think of him as the 20th hijacker.
Right.
Right, and
he wasn't. You know, he didn't follow the pattern. The pattern is that they go in pairs, they do their thing, they just follow orders from whoever their squad leader is. They don't even know what they're going to be asked to do, but they know it's a mission.
Right.
And the reason they're in pairs is so that if one gets cold feet, the other will say, "Oh, come on," you know.
Right.
That works.
So Phyllis,
yeah, go ahead.
Well, we one thing that I found really inspiring was how you were traveling the world with Zacarias' mother, and you ended up with her in Germany. And
yeah, there used to be a big gala and a ceremony in Berlin commemorating the Berlin Wall coming down on the anniversary of it. And they would honor people in 4 categories. I mean, very prestigious people, and a lot of Nobelists, Nobel Prize winners. And the organizer of it had read about us in the Forgiveness Project, which is FwdRad.io, and they invited us to receive an award for crossing borders. So that was quite an honor. That was quite something.
And then you and Orlando went to Sing Sing, right?
Yes.
And can you tell us about that?
Yes. Well, we started to become interested in convicted felons. You know, why do people commit acts of violence? How to understand what goes on in their minds, what's in their backgrounds to get them to that point. And a friend of ours was a volunteer at Sing Sing. The priest there, the Catholic chaplain, was very popular and ran a wonderful place that was open to people of all religions, and they could feel safe in the chapel. So she told him about us, and then he invited us to speak at one of his semi-annual weekend retreats, and they always had a theme, you know, a theme of reconciliation, forgiveness, etc., all the good things. And I couldn't go, but Orlando went in and met with the inmates for a day and told his story. And then they took to him. So there were these dialogues and these discussions where people accepted each other coming from where they were. And this is also very significant for people who are locked up, that someone who was victimized can see the people who've done terrible things as individuals who have their good sides too,
right,
or are trying to learn and change their own lives.
It's really incredible because people always say, what if it was your mother, your son? Did you lose anyone on September 11th? Or would you be against the death penalty if it was your relative, right? Like the famous Michael Dukakis episode. And it is really, I mean, inspiring and kind of amazing and awesome in the literal word of awesome, not in the way it's used, but that you are someone who did lose a loved one, and yet you were able to see that, for instance, invading Afghanistan or going to war in Iraq were not going to help the situation, right?
Right.
And what about Orlando says something in the film about how the forgiveness for him was related to who Greg was?
Yeah, I believe what he meant was that Greg was he was a lover of humanity, and he connected with people. It didn't matter what they looked like. It didn't matter what they sounded like. He was interested in their core, getting to know the essence of the person. So he was very open and accepting, and and we thought he would react the way we are too, that we did too. And you know, in the film, you see that there is you know, there's something of how, on looking back, it influenced Orlando's thinking, looking back on the kind of person Greg was. And it's not that the principles were any different, but it's from a different point of view. So meaning that you want to understand, and you don't want to be eaten up by your own anger and bitterness.
Right.
Well,
and I want to say something, if I may, about the word forgiveness. I don't believe in forgiveness as just a word, because it means thousands of different things to thousands of different people. And the Forgiveness Project, which was started by a British journalist, has dozens and dozens of stories of people who found a way to either forgive or not for something terrible that had happened to them. And there are all these different definitions, because it's generally assumed that it's in the province of religion, you know, that God forgives, and therefore you should forgive. But what does it mean? So in the first couple of years, I thought, what? Forgive? What are they talking about? I heard speakers, you know, murder victims' families for reconciliation and whatnot. I thought, I could never do that. But then, starting to think and reading, and I found definitions of forgiveness that I could identify with. For example, one woman says, forgiving is like chemotherapy. It's the poison you have to take to stay alive. I mean, it's poison, but it does good for you. And then Desmond Tutu says people think forgiveness is an act of altruism, but it isn't. It's in our own self-interest.
Right.
So, and then the one that resonates for me the best is that trying to understand why somebody would do that, what's in their history, their background, to take away this mystery of someone who's unnatural doing something that no one could ever think of. You know, what leads people to act this way?
Right. And it's interesting that it's kind of the similar concept with justice, right? We think, I mean, so many politicians brag about being tough on law and order, and they think that they're being like weak or, pushovers if they show any signs of compassion or any signs of kind of believing in rehabilitation instead of punishment. But of course, not only is that the just thing to do, but it's also in our self-interest if we just step back, right? Like when we put people in solitary confinement and then release them back into society, it's not actually good for us either.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I just wish that people would make that. That's why I think it's so great what you and Orlando are doing, because that point really needs to be made. That was our interview with Phyllis Rodriguez, who lost her son Gregory on 9/11. I'm going to be playing more from an additional interview that I did with Phyllis. I also did an interview with Phyllis that I'm going to share. But before we do that, I want to play for listeners Benjamin Bratt reading the letter that Orlando and Phyllis had written, not in our son's name. It was included in the book, A People's History of the United States, edited by Anthony Arnove and Howard Zinn.
Our son Greg is among the many missing from the World Trade Center attack. And since we first heard the news, we have shared moments of grief, comfort, hope, despair, fond memories with his wife, the two families, our friends and neighbors, his loving colleagues at Cantor, Fitzgerald, Eastmead, and all the grieving families that daily meet at the Pierre Hotel. We see our hurt and our anger reflected amongst everyone we meet. We cannot pay attention to the daily flow of news about this disaster, but we read enough of the news to sense that our government is heading in the direction of violent revenge, with the prospect of sons, daughters, parents, friends in distant lands dying, suffering, and nursing further grievances against us. It is not the way to go. It will not avenge our son's death, not in our son's name. Our son died a victim of an inhuman ideology. Our actions should not serve the same purpose. Let us grieve, let us reflect and pray. Let us think about a rational response that brings real peace and justice to our world, but let us not, as a nation, add to the inhumanity of our times.
That was Benjamin Bratt reading Phyllis and Orlando Rodriguez's letter, Not in Our Son's Name. Now I'm going to be playing some of the extra interview that I did with Phyllis.
Once it was evident that our government was going to start bombing innocent people, I was very angry. And when the even before that, the Patriot Act was formed, our nation had an opportunity in the beginning to do a lot of positive stuff. And one of them was to be introspective and to think about our policies in the Middle East and other countries. And are we contributing to this awful anger against us? I feel it was squandered, an opportunity to join the international community to work for right. It's like what is it? I think it's a terrible paraphrase, but I think Mahatma Gandhi said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, and soon the whole world will be blind. So, yeah, that's right. So, we really have to question, and we have to question in the face of corporate media, tied very strongly to commercial interests in our country and political interests, which doesn't want us really to question our policies and what we do.
We often people say, if it were your son, if it were your daughter, if your wife, husband, and the expectation is, of course, that people say, well, yeah, you're right. I would support the death penalty, or I would support the invasion of Afghanistan. Have you been able to... Two questions. Has anyone ever asked you that, not knowing that you had lost a son in the towers? And have you ever been able to convince someone, or at least open their mind by saying, look, it did happen to me, it happened to my son, and yet I do not want to pursue military response or vengeance?
Well, it maybe a few times with someone not knowing, because how often do you get into those conversations with people? But plenty of times from people who do know, and actually a couple of people who are very angry at us for taking these positions and for having a relationship with Aisha al-Wafi. They felt we were traitors. And I've been called a terrorist sympathizer, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, I have been able to, and I might say also that I always used to wonder, because I've always been opposed to the death penalty. It was moot until the Supreme Court ruled that states could decide, and then it came back to New York State. And I used to wonder, would I still be opposed to it if someone was brutally killed? And I really didn't know. I don't think you can know. I've met people, not 9/11 people, but who've had someone murdered and who've had the whole range of responses. On the first time I was allowed to go down to Guantanamo Bay to observe the military tribunals, I was with a group of 7 other family members. And we used to have wonderful discussions because we all accepted each other's differences. I was the most radical. Actually, they named me their liberal, and I said, what do you mean liberal? I'm a radical. And so we ran the gamut from, string 'em high to
never under any circumstances. And we had really good discussions, and I made some people think, and they told me. And there were some people who said I'm opposed to the death penalty, but in this case, not. I'm really angry. And I remember asking them, do you think you'd feel better if these men were convicted and executed? It's not going to bring our sons back, you know. And it's only a momentary, maybe a feeling of victory, and then there you are. You know, the same old story, but some people got killed.
So there were people who went down to Guantanamo who wanted them to be convicted and executed.
Yes, definitely.
And so some of those people said that maybe you changed their minds, or?
Yes. Well, we also talked about why they're being tried in military tribunals and not in federal court. We had a lot of discussions. And one other mother, there were 3 of us mothers who lost sons in Cantor, which must have been a coincidence. But she said I changed her mind because not only that, during the time she wasn't convinced, but we have a friendship, and I would send her things, we'd talk about things, and she said, you know, now I realize you're right. This is never going to end, and nothing will happen. And so, and about the death penalty, that couple and another one, the other mothers, you know, had to think. They told me, you know, well, it's true. It won't bring our sons back. You know, and what's the reason for having prisons and for having just court proceedings that follow the rules of our Constitution, of human rights, of the Geneva Conventions Against Torture? If we convict people fairly and they are found guilty, we want to protect society from dangerous people. We have the means to do that. But I will say something, you know, you remind me of something that Greg once said when he was 14, and this really made me think, and it formed a lot of my outlook. When he was 14, he went with his Spanish class in Croton Harmon High School to a month of the summer in Salamanca, Spain. And each kid lived with a family, and the following year their kids came and lived with us. And when he came back afterwards, he said, you know, the Spanish hate the French hate the Spanish, everyone hates the Germans. He said, nationalism stinks. I said, what? Woo! He's got something there. Well, he was like a lot of kids of activist parents. He was very rebellious for a while, and, you know, he didn't want to have anything to do with it, with any causes. Leave me alone. But then he became active in CISPAS, which was the committee in solidarity with the people of El Salvador, when he was about 19, and that affected him. Then he had to make a living, so he started working in financial companies in IT. And I think the other thing was left by the wayside. However, he had deep convictions. And once we were having a discussion about the death penalty and about juries, he said, if I were picked for a jury in a capital case, I would lie and say either I don't know or yes, I'm for it. And I get on the jury. And I thought, that's wonderful. And then I thought, wait a minute, he could do it because he didn't have a record of actually demonstrating against the death penalty. But I thought, what a wonderful thing. You know, if a law is unjust, we have to do something about it. I mean, it's illegal. You could get into trouble, but it's the right thing to do. Yeah. I've been asked, how do you think Greg would feel if he knows what you're doing? You know, what would his reaction be? Would he support you? And I said, I think he probably would. He'd probably laugh and say, oh yeah, Mom, Dad, just like you. But then also, my feeling is not whether he would approve. It's whether, if the roles were reversed, would he follow his conscience? I think that's the main thing, and that's what we're doing. We're following our consciences.
That was my interview with Phyllis Rodriguez. She and her husband, Orlando Rodriguez, are really incredible activists and people. And Phyllis was just talking to me about how she's turned the grief over her son's death into fighting for peace and reconciliation and justice and against militarism. I'm going to be posting even more of that interview. Make sure you go to thekatiehalpershow.com and the Katie Halper Show Facebook page, and I'll be posting the rest of it. Make sure you also go to inoursonsname.com to find out more about the documentary about the Rodriguez family, and check out September 11 Families for a Peaceful Tomorrow. You can always hear us Wednesdays at 7 p.m. on WBAI, that's 99.5 FM, or FwdRad.io. Also check us out on SoundCloud and iTunes, and rate us and review us on iTunes. And make sure you keep an eye out for Patreon so you can get extra special goodies from the Katie Halper Show, like exclusive interviews, videos. We will see you again next week. And you can look forward to some upcoming interviews with Glenn Greenwald, Jim Hightower, and Ben Jealous.